Right. So feet down, sitting up in your chair, just rubbing your hands together. And gently tapping, quite soft fingers, almost like you're just tapping on a drum and getting the sort of vibration of the drum. And over your head, down to your neck. Keeping your arm quite loose, and again, seeing if you can get a sense that when you strike your arm, it's like you get this sort of vibration. The side. And the upper part of the chest. And just slightly cupped, slightly curved, loosen your wrists, belly. And then sitting back with your feet out. So when I trained in Chinese massage, my teacher used to get us doing these things to ourselves as part of the massage. And he always used to say, you know, go very firm. Interestingly, he was also very interested in African drumming. so I did wonder whether he got confused sometimes. But it's not just a sort of it's not a hard tap, but it's not light in a sense. It's almost like you're trying to sort of get the whole muscle, get that whole part of the body shaking just very gently. And now settling back, letting your weight drop back into the chair. Feeling where the weight is in your body, so it'll be somewhere probably middle to upper back, that kind of area, and then depending on your size of the chair, so lower back, hips, buttocks, a little bit of weight in your heels. And just those are the areas, wherever you feel it, that you want to initially get that sense of release in. And one of the reasons for doing that tapping at the beginning is that sometimes if there's areas that are stiff or tight or a bit kind of blocked or stuck, stagnant would be the term in Chinese medicine, one of the terms we would use, then the shaking movement can kind of shake that up literally and release it. That's going to be a bit more chance to get that sense of allowing yourself to sink back, not resisting the pull of gravity. Excuse me. And then just feeling the response of the rest of your body. So as you soften in your back, for instance, what I often find is that my shoulders are falling back. I think once before I showed you this posture is based on an exercise where you raise your arms up and you just leave them in this ball holding position, but you try and get the angle of your arms in such a way that rather than having to strain to hold them up, the weight of them is coming back into your shoulders. I'll show you from the side, a bit tricky really, but there. So I don't want my hands there particularly or there. I want the sense that there, and it's like, oh, okay, so now that kind of drops back. So that might be a useful thing. It depends how you feel about having your arms out there. Don't strain. It's still strong, and you're still having to maintain a shape with your arms as you do this. Gradually, you'll find that your muscles will condition to make that easier. But the main thing is this: if I were here, I thought, just flop back, and I'm like that. So with or without your arms, just if you bring your hands down, see if you can feel the weight of your arms on your legs or on your belly, wherever resting. So then changing position again, bringing your feet back in, come into the upright position. These are all things that we want to try and develop in the upright postures, whether seated or standing. The key, as always, is going to be understanding how your body responds to the pull of gravity, and just working with that response a little bit, finding the alignment where you feel that you're not having to strain to maintain the position, but rather a combination of allowing gravity to drop down through your body, and at the same time feeling a stronger structure, a stronger quality, more deeply within your body, and in the lower part of your body, of course, feet and hips. My first teacher used to say, and she said this about standing posture, but it applies to the seated posture, that a bit like if you hang a coat on a hook, that it just drops down and the coat hangs down, which is quite a useful image. Doesn't quite work for me, because I do feel that there's a bit more of a structure. A coat hanging on a hook is just flopping down, but actually this idea that there's an inner structure makes it feel more, to me, if you could imagine, rather than a garment on a hook, you can think of something wrapped around a tailor's dummy. The garment hangs down, and the dummy has the structure to hold it up. And the term that we use in Tai Chi, what we often say is you relax, but the Chinese term is Song, S-O-N-G, or sometimes S-U-N-G. And like all Chinese terms, it's complex and it's evolving, and like all language, really, context is important. But the character for Song has various components, and one of them is a tree, upright tree. Another one is hair hanging down, and again, that's quite an interesting image. If you think of, hair has substance, but it doesn't usually stick out, or I suppose it does for some people. But you have this image of hair hanging down. It's not just sort of like shapeless, but it's not stiff and hard either. But what it's hanging down from is the tree. That's that sense of an inner structure. So relax is certainly in there as part of the meaning, but so are various other ideas. You could think of supple, you could think of soft, elastic. You could extend that to things like, the mind being calm and so on and so forth. They're all there somewhere in that idea of Sung. So if I say relax sometimes as a shorthand, I'm really referring to that. And this is where we begin to find this quality. We want the structure to support that. So the initial postures that we take, both standing and seated, are there to enable you to understand these qualities a little bit. They're not the only postures we take, and they're certainly not the only postures we take in our daily lives. But once you've got a sense for the feeling of the movement, then you have something to aim for. You have something to refer to when you're thinking about this. So some of it is physical alignment, and in the case of the seated, that means you don't want to be right back here, because there's just that sense of a gap behind you. You'll probably stiffen up in your back. You go forwards just a little bit. There's a little weight there, and here you're nice and central. Your head is nice and central. Your body's tilted, but there's still an upright quality here going down through the crown of your head. In practice, that means about a third of your weight forwards. So using the ideal posture as close as possible to develop your awareness of how this feels. And as we go through different movements, then we want to recall this feeling. Now, some of the movements take us out of that posture, or push away from that central line. So it's quite difficult to maintain that. Two things about that. One is that central line is always there in the back of your mind. So it's like you've still got that connection with it. A bit, I sometimes describe it as like a boat moored to a post in the sea. The boat moves away from the post, but it's tied to it, so it comes back. It doesn't drift away too far. The second thing is that as you move, then what we retain isn't just about the physical structure, but also that feeling. And our bodies are very good at responding to those kind of things. You know, if you look through an old photo album and you look at that and you see a photograph and you laugh, that's a very strong physical reaction to an image. Our bodies do that all the time. And so these feelings, this understanding that we develop through the practice, we begin to store them like photographs in an album. So sometimes we might think of an external image, like a bird flying, for instance, polishing the table. But we also have these more personal, internalized images, you could call them. And they're often more accessible because we kind of have more ownership of them. So the basic postures are important for reinforcing us, for reminding us of those. I think I may have said to this group, I've said to other groups, I think, that it's a bit like, you know, if you're going to sit down and do some paperwork or something like that, or if you're going to do some cooking, you'll get the ingredients out of the cupboard or the drawer, and you'll line everything up, and then you've got everything that you need. And in the same way, at the start of a Tai Chi session, we bring those ingredients out and we just have them there. They're fairly accessible anyway. And this becomes part of how we focus our intent. So as we develop in Tai Chi, that becomes a stronger quality. So just turning your head a little. Also, that's quite personal, how we sort of experience Sung, rooting down, all these different things. And it's not necessarily a fixed thing. You may find that, you know, unlike the photograph in the album, it changes, it develops, it grows. So now as you begin to move, even with these, especially perhaps with these very simple movements, those images, those ideas that we focus our intent through are a little bit in the background, but very much still there. And then your shoulders. So this is where we begin to get that sense of the overlapping, the interrelatedness of these three elements of Tai Chi, the three treasures: body, mind, and movement, energy, however you care to think of it, working as one unit. And going forwards. And then one, rotating your arms. Quite often the first indication that we've lost some of the structure, some of the posture, or when we're not doing the movement correctly, will be the loss of some of those qualities of movement, some of those background qualities that we're not thinking about, but suddenly feel a bit stiff. And you think, oh, what's going on? What am I doing here? And that's when we can maybe start to bring our attention again, and maybe a little bit of analysis, maybe just an image like the flow of water through that area, releasing that area, or breathing into that area. And then winding around. And in terms of awareness, try not to think of concentration. Concentration isn't a very helpful term because it tends to be very singular. and it tends to be quite sort of stiff in a way, quiet and concentrating. And this isn't the kind of attention that we necessarily need quietness for. That the other way, it's not at the front of our brain, it sits in the background. I quite like the idea of gathering. We're gathering these things in, and they're just there until they're not, and then we know that we're not. And then easing forwards and pushing back. So with practice, that awareness, that background awareness, is just ticking away like one of these computer programs that ticks away in the back of the computer, or the sound of your fridge in the kitchen, an image that I've used sometimes. Lots of things tick away in the background. And we develop that quality through the exercises. The exercises can be a bit distracting. Well, sometimes we'll do quite difficult exercises. A little test of that awareness, that your ability to maintain that awareness. And as that strengthens, then that's what we take out of the class with us into our daily lives. With all the benefits of that, we're walking down the road and we suddenly realise, we're thinking of, we realise how we're walking, and we maybe want to change things, or maybe we think, oh, that's good, that was going really nicely, or something like that. And then turning a little. So there's always an aspect to learning where we're following what a teacher's doing, where we're finding the choreography of the movement. I don't think that ever passes in Tai Chi. It certainly hasn't passed for me, but it's not the whole process of learning. It's not just about learning how to move the arm in this movement or that movement, turning the other way. It's about developing this skill of maintaining the right kind of awareness of yourself, whilst you're not necessarily focusing directly on that. And then going around. And then back the other way. So the familiarity with the routine really helps with that process. Now, just stepping out. So for instance, as you do the stepping, you're familiar with this, heel, toe, maybe that's a bit of a push down, drawing your foot back. But in the back of your mind, is there also a little thing about what's happening in your hips, what's happening in your shoulders? And we all need reminding. On the other side. Okay. Now, hands down to your sides. Bird folds its wings. So when we do the movements, we're engaging all of those three jewels. I think of them as being like the three legs of a tripod. They're not separate things. They're not just all individual components that we can discard or use whenever we wish. They're very much part of the whole structure. So the emphasis is always on that quality of sung and that softening aspect of sung. Wherever we find any sense of gripping, of tightening, we look to soften that. And that softening spreads the load of the movement, the effort out. Changing now to fisherman cast the net. So, very common when we do this exercise to see people doing all sorts of variations with their arms and their hands. This is very common, lifting the arms up. But if you're paying attention, you'll realize that actually that's just making your arms work harder. And so we stop doing that, we soften, and then we begin to feel, well, there's things happening in chest, in our back, and of course the weight is moving. Fingers are spread out, trailing behind the wrist always. A little bit of a flexion and extension in the wrist as a consequence. And that means that the joint, the wrist joint, has been carefully and gently worked. And then there's the flow of the movement itself. So although quite often when we sort of think about a movement, the first thing we will become aware of is maybe certain muscles, certain joints being used, but we want to broaden that awareness out to include a whole body. When one part of the body is in movement, our whole body is engaged. It's like you might set up the tripod for the camera or the telescope in such a way that one maybe it's leaning forwards a bit, so there's more weight perhaps in the front leg, but that doesn't mean that we can discard the other two legs. And then coming over, another image might be the idea of the tent. Tent has an inner frame, an outer skin, which is in its turn supported by the guy ropes. They're all pegged out, and it may be that certain guy ropes are more crucial, but to maintain the overall shape, the usefulness of the tent, we need all of the pegs to be engaged in one way or another. And Tai Chi is not just about muscles, not just about tendons or ligaments. It includes things like the fascia, the bones, the fluidity of the movement, the movement itself, flow, the energy. That would include things like our blood, our breath. They all have a part to play in the whole. They all benefit from the whole. And then sitting back, pigeon spreads its wings. This is a good exercise to feel that whole body movement. You can feel your weight moving from hips to feet and back. And so that means that you're your legs are active in the movement, your hips, your pelvis. You feel your spine moving forwards and backwards. Your back will expand and contract depending on which direction your arms are moving in, which direction your weight is moving in. So as you go forwards and your hands come in, the back lengthens and broadens slightly, reversing that as you go back. Front of your body, belly, solar plexus, chest, doing the same as the back, but the opposite way round. You feel that movement there, expanding and contracting. Shoulders, of course, again, part of the movement, connecting the movement with your arms. Clearly, your arms are moving, maintaining the position of your head as you move forwards and backwards. It's a good exercise to get that whole body feeling and to get the feedback from that, because now that whole body feeling is part of that memory, part of that photo album that you can recall. And then pushing away. This is one reason why we would recommend practice in the morning. It's just kind of reviewing these ideas, reminding ourselves that as we go through our day, we have that potential to feel that sense of the whole body in movement. We have the potential to rest our attention in that. This time, twisting your hands. Also tremendously beneficial for our mind, for our awareness. Remembering that by mind, we're including not just thinking, but feeling and our emotional responses and so on and so forth. All sorts of things come into mind. And all of those benefit from this sense of grounding within the body. They're not going away anywhere. We're not trying to reject them. But we find just that sense of stillness kind of at the heart of them. Like we've just arrived at a clearing in a wood. We can rest in that clearing and still view the wood. Still see what's happening. And then turning your hands out. Good, and then turn your hands palm down. polishing the table. Very much one of those movements that challenges these ideas as we tilt forwards. Somebody made an interesting comment in a class yesterday. They said that she'd been pruning a tree and she was up a ladder, and she named this exercise, polishing the table, as one that was really helpful, because rather than leaning backwards, which obviously is quite tricky when you're on a ladder, she was able to sort of get a sense of her hips sinking. That's a really interesting thing. That means that while she was concerned with pruning the tree, she was also using that awareness that we generate in these arts. Turning your hands palm up. This next set of exercises, I think is much trickier to maintain that awareness of the connections. And it's something about those connections, the way that we're using the body, that means that we need that awareness. It's almost like our awareness is like shining a light in a dark room, like focusing our attention on a particular item in a shop window, or in a particular conversation in a crowded room. So if our awareness isn't with us while we're doing this, we'll tend to lose some of that very holistic quality to the movement. But we're still using our legs, we're still using our hips, we can still feel movement up and down our back and spine. Vardhus. Expanding, contracting. Start to realize that if we can identify those rhythms within our body, our breathing, just in the general sense of movement in the body, then that sense of resonance, remember when I said about the tapping, and we're tapping, then we get that sense of shaking, that sense of vibrating. Vibration is just another way of describing energy, I suppose, in that sense. But also vibration connects, something that vibrates. You know, if you've got central heating, if you just tap on one radiator, then the vibration, the sound, will travel to other radiators, for instance. And so again, we get that sense of the holistic, very fluid, very balanced movement. Heart in the clouds. Dragon plucks the stars from the sky. One more time. And then pushing in forward in two directions to begin with, upwards and sideways. There are key points always. One very important one, I feel, and I've talked about this quite a lot recently, I know, is that feeling that any kind of extension upwards or outwards from your body is preluded by a feeling of your hips sinking. Just that moment, renewing that connection to the ground, renewing that idea of the root, and then coming back to it and using that sinking down as the starting point for the extension. Just like if you were walking along the road, the starting point for the step would actually be a push downwards through one foot or another. And then add in the turn if it's comfortable for you. And just make sure that no part of your body, muscle or tendon or ligament, fascia, any of the soft tissue or any of the fluids are being asked to strain, to tighten up, to stiffen. Extend one foot, scooping the sea and looking at the sky. Another movement that extends out. And one very important photograph here, one important memory that you want to really renew each time you do this and other exercises is the significance of that dropping back in your hips. You're not straining to maintain your body position at any point. Rather, you feel as though it's being held for you. And then hands fisted, grasping the tiger's ears. Paradoxically, that attention to your hips improves the exercise for your muscles, tendons, and ligaments, because you're now doing the movement correctly. We're not creating tightening, tension in the muscles. On the other side. And it's not to say that that's ever the wrong thing to do, but it's not what Tai Chi is for. Tai Chi develops this more holistic sense. We may think, oh, hold on, maybe I need to strengthen my quadriceps. Maybe the muscles of my back need a bit more strength, which is fine. And we can go off and do that. There's plenty of opportunities, plenty of ways that can be done. And it can be an important part of improving your overall movement, including your Tai Chi. But if you're in a hurry for that to happen, you'll have to go elsewhere. Tai Chi would do it for you with practice and with careful practice. And then, so for instance, when we do this exercise, grasping the tiger's ears, when we're in this position, I'll show you from the side, when we're here, it's not the shoulders that are tight. If anywhere is going to be under pressure, shall we call it, it will be the muscles going down the length of your back, just to be in that position comfortably. You don't want to get to here and go, oh, fighting against your own body. And if that is happening, then you have to just sit back a little bit, make a smaller movement, practice it regularly so that the conditioning takes place. And then you'll start to feel that things like muscle and tendon, fascia begin to engage more. One more time. So I sometimes describe Tai Chi as being the Guinness of exercises, referring to, I don't know if they just still do it, I don't know how to see it, but they used to advertise Guinness as being the beer that reaches parts that other beers can't reach. And it was interesting, a few months ago, one of my classes for Forever Active was monitored by one of the people that are used for the monitoring process, lovely woman called Lisa. She works for NHS. She's an exercise specialist working for the NHS. So she knows what she's talking about. She knows the stuff. And it was a seated class like this one. At the end of the class, she came up to me and the first thing she said was, it's really good how said she could really feel how it was working, what she referred to as the skeletal muscles. And these are the muscles that are not necessarily being used at any one moment to move the body, but rather there to support the body. The classic example of that is the muscles between the vertebrae of the spine. They're not really involved in mobilization in the same way that, say, your biceps and your triceps are. At different times with different movements, most muscles will swap function as far as I can tell, but some muscles are either mobilizers or stabilizers. Those stabilizing muscles, are very important because when we start to bring them into the movement, they start to contribute to the movement. So when we do, say, for instance, grasping the tiger's ears, if we're doing it correctly and we're not straining in our shoulders or struggling in our back, we've now extended those muscles between the spine, and the return in movement will involve a contraction on their part, and so on and so forth. So the structure of the exercises, the structure of the body when we're moving is a vital part of developing that aspect of Tai Chi. Beginning to develop the parts that other exercises don't reach. So this is part of the holistic nature. It's not just muscle either. Fascia, we're becoming increasingly aware in modern science, modern biology, of the significance of the fascia to the body in all sorts of ways. So it's almost like the Tai Chi, Qigong exercises have evolved to really focus on those kind of areas. That's why an understanding of the exercises improves, and the quality that we get, the benefits that we get really improve. Now, hands in front of you and just sweeping around and down towards your hip, coming up in this sideways 8 or the infinity sign, coming back down. A slight movement of your weight. Here your body expands upwards. Here we go forwards a little bit to sweep the hands around and then back. I'll show you again from the side, we expand up, forwards and back. So this way, and once again, we're engaging the whole of the body in the movement, not just the arms. This isn't meant to be like a kind of weight training exercise for our arms and our hands. Again, nothing wrong with doing that. But remember that holistic nature of Tai Chi. Use the image of moving through water. That's another background image. If that's all you can think about, you'll lose the pattern. But if we train our attention to include that in this gathering process, then we start to feel the change in the movement, that strengthening, that conditioning of all of those three jewels, all of those three elements, body, mind, and energy. And this time, as your arms come up, push the opposite heel up. You just see my knee moving a little bit there. So now we get a little bit of a push from the foot. I'm exaggerating. See my body. I wouldn't want my body to move, but I want to feel that movement through my body. And again. And then maybe just change into a lifting movement. So we push the heel up, get that rise, and then just allow the foot to come up. One more on each side. Okay, now rubbing your hands together once again. And tapping over your face. Over your head again. And the shoulder and your arm. The side. Upper part of the chest. The belly. Pushing your knee up again just to focus on the muscles of the legs in particular, just warming them up before you go and stand on them. And then on the other side. Okay, and then standing. So feet hip width apart. And sinking down a little. And we'll do these three exercises in a sequence. So we'll do rooting down. And then the wild goose. And part in the clouds. One more time. One foot forwards. and transferring your weight. That awareness that I'm talking about will really help you with maintaining the structure while you're in movement, just as if you drive a car or ride a bike, or even when you walk along, you're aware of what the bike's doing, what the car is doing. You don't have to keep thinking, oh, do I need to do this? But because you're aware of it, if something goes amiss, oh, there's a bump there, something's rubbing or something like that, then you're able to do something about that. And just raising your toes and your heel. Once again, try and get away from the idea of concentrating. Concentrating is a very focused, almost closed thing. Gathered in is perhaps a better way of doing it, so that nothing is excluded. Stepping in. Remember that feeling of your hips dropping back. Find that in rowing a boat. We find that in polishing the table. And then on the other side. So just pull that out of the photo album. Pull that out. Pull that memory of the hips dropping back, and see how that affects not just your ability to move, but your whole posture. Because if you can get that, there's now that slight sense of a pull on the spine, and that has an impact on the spine itself, on those muscles between the spine and the muscles of the back. Our habit is to not do all these things, so we're trying to just replace those habits, raising your toes and your heel. So then when we begin to step, people do have this thing about standing on one leg. And actually, that broad awareness, that gathered awareness, is one of the most useful things to help us do this. Obviously, there's a physical element to this, but remember, that is integrated with our awareness. It's important that your foot goes down in the correct place. If I get it wrong, if I put my foot here and I go back, I'm a bit wobbly now and I can't stand on one leg. Whereas I'm even having trouble on this leg now because that was wrong. Now, he says optimistically, I can go back to doing it. And then stepping through. And then going back. So have your right foot forwards. Start with your weight in your front leg, hands in front of you. Sit back and turn towards the back leg. Raising up. This infinity movement coming down towards your front hip. Now raise your hand and your foot. I mean, put the toes down if you're unsteady, but if you can, just see if you can just pull the knee up. Observe how your body is doing this. Are you, for instance, as you bring the knee up, are you tilting slightly? Oops, I have to put the toes down when I do that. When you bring your hands up, can you feel your hips sinking down? Or are you kind of coming up like that and getting a bit wobbly? Can you, again, settle down? Feel the effect of all of that on every aspect of your movement and your body. when one part of your body is in motion, your whole body is part of that movement, one way or another. That's true for every movement. Just a basic principle in Tai Chi. And then we repeat together. Lovely, return to the chair. So people sometimes ask me sort of like about the similarities between Tai Chi and other exercise forms. And I think really what's useful, what's interesting it isn't about what's similar in our movements when we do Tai Chi. You know, what is the same? There's only so many ways you can move the human body, at least without doing something drastic to it. So it's not about this movement does this or this movement does that. It's about the overall approach. Somebody once used the term orthogonal, and their description of that was, if you imagine, if you look out your living room window onto your lawn or whatever, you see a certain view of the lawn. If you decided you wanted to build an extension, if you built an extension at 90 degrees, then if you went into that extension, you'll see the same lawn, but you'll see it from a different view. It's not saying that one is right or one is wrong. They're just different. Both perspectives have something to offer, but they're not the same. And in that sense, Tai Chi has this orthogonal quality about it. I think it's quite an interesting image that, and I think we get the most out of the exercise when we begin to really understand that. Now just let your hands drop down and coming back, feeling your hips sinking down, embrace tiger, return to mountain, coming back to this posture that encapsulates that quality of Sun, what we sometimes refer to in Tai Chi as central equilibrium. The Chinese term is Zhongding. This is the core feeling, the heart of the experience of Tai Chi. And it's no accident that this is what we allow ourselves to come back to at the end of a class. So one more time. And rest. And open your eyes. Lovely. Thank you very much, everybody.